even if you're someone who's good at being, being a chameleon and being the person that is most thought to be most desired in a given situation, the emotional toll that takes on people, the amount of satisfaction and energy that you can bring over a long period of time to the work that you're doing, it's all limited by the fact that you're kind of faking your way through it. I don't think that ultimately. I've not been exposed to a situation where that's been helpful to anyone in the long term. And so I think just giving people the freedom to be who they are, and to work within those boundaries to find good careers and happiness. That is a tenet at the core of our neurodiverse solutions program.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Tech podcast. I am your host, David Mancella. Today we have with us Matthew Peters. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So Matthew, can you tell me your name again? Where do you live and what do you do for a living? Where are you working at right now?
So Matthew Peters, I'm currently the Chief Technology Officer at a professional services firm called CAI. We're headquartered in Allentown, Pennsylvania. I live, I guess this is about 30 miles west of there in central PA. CAI, just for background's sake, it's a privately held firm that kind of does a lot of the work that you might expect a technical focused professional services firm to do, right? Lots of consulting, lots of application design development, AI, service desk, all that kind of stuff. The thing that I think makes the organization a little unique compared to a lot of our peers is that we, in addition to that, have a focus on providing life-sustaining career opportunities for neurodivergent individuals. So part of CAI's focus when we're delivering any of that kind of work that I just described is to look for opportunities where we can use, in particular, autistic adults. So anybody on the autism spectrum who is moderate to high functioning and can do usually an extraordinary job at specific roles and responsibilities if they have the right accommodations in place to be able to make that work. So that's a big focus for us. As a result, we're one of the largest employers of on-spectrum individuals in technical roles in the United States.
That's incredible. When I heard that when I was doing the screening interview with you, I was so excited to do your podcast because you are a technology company. I mean, I have a software business called ISU Corp, and we do only software development services for other companies. And I cannot imagine how could I actually employ people with challenges like that, like you guys are doing. So it's beautiful. How do you figure this out? Like, were they the founders that started with this program? Do you know the story?
So I'd say for the leadership of our organization, everybody in an executive position has someone in their life who is on spectrum, and that was a big point of origin for the program overall. It's gone through a few iterations. So for CAI, finding employment opportunities for on-spectrum individuals is at least 10 years old at this point. We've been doing it for a while, and we've gone through some name changes. But at its origin, it was really just folks in leadership roles in our company at the time who were in a position to make a difference, talking to the parents of on-spectrum kids who were struggling with finding a way to get their kid through things like the job interview process, which most on-spectrum adults are not really well designed or predisposed to succeed at. So they were in a position to be able to say, well, we can change that aspect of how that sort of an individual gets to employment, and just chose to do so in order to make a difference. As a result of doing that, we really found that this is not so much a philanthropic thing to do, although it is a good thing to do. This is really an economic decision, right? When you hone in on the right kinds of job opportunities for those individuals, under nearly all circumstances, we see that they outperform what would otherwise be classified as their neurotypical peers in the same role. And so at this point, within CAI's leadership team, all of us are, we have a nephew or a niece or a child who has autism. I myself, my oldest daughter is autistic, and so part of the only reason we found that out as early as we did is because I was already working at CAI, so I already had a lot more autism awareness than the average adult or parent in the United States. So when she started displaying some unusual behaviors that the normal identification channels, like a school, would be what we would rely on to appropriately identify her, she wasn't being identified because she's also gifted. A lot of gifted kids do a great job of covering up what would otherwise be seen as early indicators of any kind of a neurological disorder. So she was very much in that camp. She's extremely gifted, but she is also on spectrum. And it was really just the background in the subject matter that I got through CAI that let me know that. So we were able to push for her and advocate for her a lot earlier in her development than she would otherwise have been identified. And, as with so many other things with child development, the earlier you get started, the better off the outcome is.
I could clearly identify that with mental health issues. I lived with severe ADHD all my life, but I was only diagnosed 2 years ago.
Yeah, she has that too. She's
right. I was wrecking my life. I was wrecking my marriage. My wife, when she found out my diagnosis, she started to cry and she said, "No wonder I had to put up with you for so many years." When I would, like, for example, I couldn't sit down for 4 hours in a single place. And for the weekends, my wife knew that she had to prepare the entire weekend so I wouldn't get bored, because my attention span was so short, and my whole life was like that. And I've been married with her for 34 years. So that doesn't mean I wasn't actually, my condition allowed me to become the person that I am now in business. I run 7 different companies now, and I'm a very successful person according to the marketplace. But it's because of my condition, because I cannot stay still.
Yeah, very much so. And I think I think that would, if we had good data on it, I'm suspicious that we would find it's surprisingly true of a lot of people in leadership positions, a lot of company founders, a lot of individuals like that because of that predisposition to think a little bit differently and to need to take a little bit more control of your schedule and the way that you work, and have the right to own it a little bit more in order to accommodate your own needs, that just sort of naturally inclines an individual to, well, then I have to run this company so that I can make the rules so that the rules can work for me. It's very much the way that my daughter thinks right now, and I'm very fortunate as well. I mean, I when I was in graduate school, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and I didn't identify it as something that I really needed to deal with. It never really affected me negatively in my professional life because I was able to get therapy for it, and I was able to address it, years ago, at this point, over 20 years ago. But it was very much a factor in making me more comfortable going on to graduate school and advanced education than going into the workforce, because at least in grad school, yeah, there's a lot of work to do, but mostly you set your own schedule. So I could control when and how I had to do things. I had a lot more ownership over what's an acceptable outcome or an acceptable way to deliver the work. And those were things that, when I was more rigidly guided or prescribed how to do work in the jobs that I had going through high school and college and everything, none of them were well suited for me, because I didn't appreciate, or I didn't know how to identify my own neurological needs in order to be successful in any of those jobs. But a little bit of therapy went a long way.
That's beautiful, Matthew. What I cannot believe is the blessing that you guys had by identifying that people like that needed a chance in life, and making it profitable. Isn't it beautiful? If we treated, listen what I want to say, because it's beautiful. If we treated social work, if we treated helping the less needy in this way, this world will not have poverty. Because when, it's actually living in the Bible. I'm a born-again Christian, so I follow Jesus and I read the Bible every day of my life. And, the learning how to fish instead of giving fish to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. It's there, right? Like, give people an opportunity and they will thrive. and you guys are taking it to your own advantage, like you say, like they are performing better in the roles than any normal person would.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that you're right. I think very often, you're likely to be right. Give an individual the opportunity to thrive, and I suspect more often than not, they will.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Matthew. Just to have some context, how big is the company you're working for? CIA.
We're just under 9,000 employees right now.
So it is a fairly size organization. Are you guys publicly traded or private?
No, we are a privately held organization. It's very much the reason we get to do a lot of the things that we do right now. We're in our second generation of family ownership. Tony, who was the founder of the organization, he has recently, I guess you'd say, completed the transition of ownership over to his son, and that's a big piece of what makes CAI special. You just like anywhere else, you attract people to work for you who have predispositions somewhat like yours. So it's a family that's very oriented toward the idea that we need to make the communities that we live and work in better for having us here, right? That's just part of our social obligation. And that was something that Tony really started. And because we were privately held, it allowed him to give the company a lot of freedom to find ways to realize that kind of a vision. And now with Tom taking the reins, we're really just seeing even more of that, an amplification of the importance of that. And Tom is very much bringing a lot of that sort of philosophy, continuing to bring it into the organization, but with an added emphasis on, we really want to grow, right? We're a big company, but we can be bigger, and the bigger we are, the more people we can help. So it's an easy rallying cry for everyone to get behind.
That's incredible, Matthew. Was Tony the founder?
Yes.
Isn't it beautiful that you can see a company starting from nothing to 9,000 people in one generation? Incredible.
Yeah. I wasn't here at the beginning of it, but I know the origin story was very much that it happened out of his garage in the trunk of his car, and then grew into what it is today. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
And then that's another thing that I love about the market, the free world. And I was born in Guatemala. Guatemala had a 30-year-old war to push away communism, and the free markets won, and now Guatemala is a very prosperous country. It's not the country torn by war that it was 20 years ago, and it's thriving and it's getting better and better. You come to Guatemala City, and it looks like Miami now. Maybe not with so many high-rise buildings, but it's very clean, very safe, very beautiful because of the free markets. But I moved to Canada in 1991 looking for better opportunities, especially in computer science. And I realized how beautiful it is to have really the rule of law and just let the economy run by itself. Mm-hmm. Like, look at you guys, 9,000 employees, privately held. I never knew about you, right? And then you hear about this 200-300 people company that are breaking the news because they got into the stock market, and they are not even a drop in a bucket compared to you guys.
Yeah, very much true.
Isn't it amazing that you can actually take your business to wherever way you want it? You don't have to be publicly traded to be a giant, right?
Oh no, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
So nice. Now, Matthew, how do you get to be where you are? Because the kind of responsibility in technology that you have is fairly impressive. What was your career like? Did you go to computer science school, or what did you do in university?
Yeah, so going through my education, I actually had background in a lot of different areas. So I studied politics, I studied psychology, I studied computer science. When I got into the master's program, I was focused on organizational psychology with an emphasis on how technology is deployed in organizations. And that let me trade on a little bit of the comp sci background. And then at the time that I was there at Penn State, they introduced their College of Information Science and Technology. So that was a brand new PhD program. It was actually being formed while I was a student there. So I moved into that, and that was actually an entire program within the university that was focused on not just the technical side of computer science, but also the human side. There's big emphasis on users, big emphasis on understanding the consumer, and had a very large business component that was integrated into the program. So it wasn't until late in my academic career that I started taking any classes in business or finance, but they were part of the core curriculum for information science and technology. So it was a pretty broad brush that ultimately that I was painting with for my academic career. But then as I was going through that, in the PhD program, you had the option to really focus on teaching or on research, and I did a little bit of both of those. But my struggle and my frustration with academia was the combination of the pace. It is actually very slow, even though I think from the outside looking in, a lot of us want to give it a lot of credit for its speed. It's really not actually the case. Like if you're a faculty member, for example, at a research institution, your success is predominantly evaluated based on the journals that you publish in and how much you publish. Well, most of what are classified as the most influential or high value journals to publish in, they have an average publication cycle time of 2.5 to 3 years. So by the time important work has been concluded, written about, and is ready to be leveraged by other people, there's now a 3-year wait to get to it. And that made me crazy, because I really wanted to work on things that were affecting the immediate user and community. And so like my dissertation research was very much focused on how do nonprofit organizations that all traditionally have very low technical skills and no budget, how do they leverage technology? How can it more easily be deployed to support them? So the research that I wanted to publish was very much about, I'm working with organizations like the Boys and Girls Club and halfway houses and different social wellness programs that help kids who are in dangerous home situations either be protected within their home or relocated or transitioned, based on a wide variety of needs. But it was work that was near and dear to me. I thought it was important, and what we were really working on was, those are all programs that are ultimately funded by the government, the state, local government, wherever. So there's a whole lot of paperwork that goes on behind them, a whole lot of administrative work that those organizations have to get done in order to be able to afford to help those kids. And I'm not arguing with the structure of that. I think it does need to be qualified. But the folks that I was working with were counselors and therapists who were working 50, 60-hour weeks with kids to provide them with the help that they needed. But then they were putting in an additional 20 and 25 hours a week to get paperwork done, because there was no one else to do the paperwork, and it had to be done. And it was really all because they were getting a piece of documentation from the county, another one from the state, another one from a different state agency. They were all essentially duplicates, but they were just sitting down and manually filling in everything individually all the way through the workload. So I'm going back in time a long time, but the focus was just, all right, we're going to put a simple little agent on people's machines that's going to look at and evaluate the work that they're doing. When it sees a redundant activity inside of Excel, for example, it pulls the correct instructional material out for Excel just to basically give you some guidance and say, hey, I see what you're doing. You're basically filling out the same form 3 times. Start with this one, and then I'll guide you through copy and paste, and we can just pick up the speed on all this, right? There wasn't a way at that time to solve the duplicate paperwork problem, but we could at least make it quicker and easier. And if you could cut down, I mean, the net result was, my goal was, well, I want to save these folks the 20 hours a week that they're putting into administrative work that is arguably low value given their mission.
That's half their week.
Exactly. Well, but not even half, because of the amount of work that they put in with the kids. Right. And so I thought, my goal is, I want to save you your 20 hours. That's fair to you so that you don't burn out. Well, by and large, the folks that are doing that kind of work have so much energy for it. What it really meant was, that thing was taking 20 hours a week down to 10, and that was just 10 more hours a week that they were giving to kids. It wasn't like now all of a sudden I work fewer hours. Now they were doing more of the work that they were there to do in the first place. So big outcomes that I wanted those to be widely available. But in an academic setting, the idea becomes, well, yes, that's a good outcome. No one's arguing with it, but the publication timeline lags on and on and on. And I look at that and say, well, if this is something that could be deployed soon and could help kids fairly immediately, but we're going to wait because that's what the publication cycle needs, that's not satisfying to me. And so that sort of pulled me a little bit further away from academia, which is where I thought I'd spend my whole life, and made me start looking at different companies. So I started doing part-time work for a variety of different large organizations in the US that were very technology focused. A lot of it was user experience design, which I was studying at the time and I really enjoyed as a job. And then just lucky for me, one of the companies that I'd signed up to do some of that work with was CAI. I liked the people that I did the work with. So when I made the decision that academia wasn't going to be my long-term career, I started interviewing with the various companies that I had been working with that I did like, and there were some that I worked with that I didn't care for and didn't want to have to work with. But when I came to CAI, I spent 2 full days. I interviewed with a huge number of people, and consistently across the organization for all the different folks in different parts of the company that I interviewed with, everybody had a story to tell about how community engagement directly affected them and their job satisfaction and why they liked the company. And it was never the same story over and over again. They all had unique examples. So it was proof to me that this is a company that I can philosophically align with. I like the way that it's managed and run. It just made sense for me. And so that was, as of May 1st, that was 16 years ago that I took a job with CAI. And over the 16 years, I've had 10 or 11 jobs within CAI. So a lot of it was really coming up to CTO. Yeah, coming up to CTO through the ranks. So, it was some technical back office work, some product design work, some R&D. I was in billable roles. I was in consulting roles. I had a lot of different kinds of jobs. I think for someone who has that sort of an opportunity, it's hugely valuable, because now in the position that I get to have, when folks in the organization come to me and articulate a problem that they need my team and I to solve, I have some level of perspective and appreciation for their job and why it's hard and why this is important. And if I had just come in from the outside and sat down in this seat, I don't know that I'd have the ability to put the appropriate level of importance behind some requests that come through and sound admittedly minor or low impact. And I know they're not, because I did that job a few years ago, and I can appreciate what a big influence getting this project right could have on the rest of the company. So it gives me, I hope, I'm hoping, I can't speak for everyone else, I hope it gives me the right perspective to help them. I guess so far I still get to keep doing this job, so that, I suppose, is the success metric.
What a beautiful story, Matthew. Did your doctorate help in landing that first job?
No, I wouldn't say. I would say the only thing that any of my education really did for me was that it taught me how to be good at learning. And that, I think, is why, CAI is an interesting company, right? As a privately held company, we structure ourselves however we think is right. So technically speaking, I'm the chief technology officer, but we don't have a chief information officer. So I have the responsibilities of that office as well, but that's not really where I put a whole lot of energy or emphasis. That's much more something that I can afford to touch infrequently, because it's operational and it keeps the lights on, and the folks on those teams are excellent at what they do, and they don't really need a whole lot of change. But for CAI to be relevant in the market and continuing to put products and services out there that matter to our customers, I have to keep learning new things in order to keep driving what's the next thing that should be built. And that's really what my education taught me, was how to be very good and very quick at learning new things all the time, and to never stop doing that. I'm making it sound like it's me at CAI, and it's really not. I think what it really did for me was give me the tools, as someone who wanted to be an educator and a lifelong learner, to make the folks on my teams appreciate the importance of lifelong learning and of continuing to educate themselves. And so they do. So, it's not like every Wednesday afternoon we sit down and have a product meeting and I'm telling them everything that we need to do. They're bringing the ideas, because we've been able to create a culture where this is important to everyone, and it's not really all about me. Ultimately, very little of it's about me at this point.
So beautiful. You remind me of a Leaders in Tech podcast interview I did yesterday. This gentleman he is an astrophysicist from MIT. He finished his doctorate. He was in love with math and physics, and he got his first job. And then he quickly realized he was going to spend 10 years to discover something that will revolutionize the world, but it was going to take 10 years behind a computer doing math equations. And he said, I am not built for that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mentioned earlier, I have obsessive compulsive disorder. I'm not designed well to be patient. I had to learn patience.
But he went through the whole program and he thought it was his passion, but once he applied it in the real world, it's like, no. So he went back to school, he got a technical writing degree, and then he got an information systems degree, and now he's the CIO for a multinational learning organization. But my point is, isn't it beautiful that you can actually shift your life to match what you were born for? You don't have to do what you went to school for, and school will give you this brilliance in learning. For me, it's exactly the same. I couldn't agree more with you. I went to 2 different science schools. I went to computer science schools in Guatemala, and then when I went to Canada, they wouldn't validate my credentials, so I went to computer science school again. And I thank the Lord, because when I graduated in Guatemala, it was all mainframe stuff. When I graduated in Canada, it was mostly mainframe stuff, but then I started getting introduced to client-server systems, to microcomputers, to everything was evolving. I'm talking 1993 to 1995. But even with that exposure, with that double exposure, when I went into my first job as a professional developer, I didn't know anything, but I knew how to learn. I mastered 5 computer languages in both schools. And when I got into this new job, I didn't know any of the languages that they required. So after they hired me, by the way, back then, software developers were like electronic engineers or electrical engineers. You only need so many. It's not very popular because this is before the internet. And so there were 300 people that applied for my job, and I got it. So after a few months, I asked my boss, why did you choose me? And then he said, well, you demonstrated that you have the capacity to learn fast. And
so
right?
Yeah. And so at that time, do you think that at the time that you got that job and you got that answer from your boss, that was incredibly unusual in the market? Because I agree. I think it is. And I'm really excited about what I'm starting to see as a shifting trend where, especially within the technology sector, I guess it's a little bit easier for us than it could be in some other disciplines. But we have folks applying for jobs. They have to go through a technical component of their interview, right? Basically, it's easy for us to create a scenario where you can demonstrate you really do know this or you don't. Yeah. And as a result, the where you went to school and what your degree was in is a lot less important than it used to be. It was the gatekeeper at one point. And so if you wanted the right job in the right career field, you had to go to the right school to get it. And I'm frankly, I think there is a lot of value in college for a lot of individuals, but I'm very heartened by a job market right now that seems to be much more predisposed to, I want the people who can prove that they can do the work. And that's really changing the landscape of who's a good and qualified candidate. And for kids in high school right now, it's changing the trajectory of what kind of schools should they be looking at and how do they select them. And I think predominantly for the better. And I can only speak to my own industry. It might be a little bit different in other ones, but within the tech sector, I love how heavily everybody seems to be starting to really lean into tech interviews. I've met lots of people who got their job because of just code they posted on GitHub, and they made themselves findable that way. And someone else was smart enough to come along and say, that's high quality and a novel way to do it, and I want to hire you. And great. I mean, it's such an amazing thing for a kid. I'll say kid, adult, technically coming out of college, but with little to no experience. Such an incredible way to be able to prove yourself as worthy of a meaningful job right away. It's great.
When I started my company back in 2005, I already knew this because of all my corporate background. So I spent about 10 years in corporate, and I went all the way up to the top. in the software departments in multinational corporations. And I was very frustrated with HR because they wouldn't allow me to create my own tests, right? Or my own way of hiring people. And that was one of the reasons why I started my own company. And I quickly realized that I needed to change the whole hiring process. So up to now, this is part of our big success. When we hire people, we give them an assignment that takes 1 week to do. 1 week to do, and it's not an easy assignment. And we make sure we give them a technical assignment that is not in the resume. Because what we're testing is the ability for them to learn and to research. And those are the only folks that are getting. Number one, 90% of people that apply are not willing to work a week for free, right? Which is great. That removes a lot of the noise. And then the 10% that stay, they really have to do the research. So it's like a research work. And the code, if it's code, whatever it is, it needs to be running. And we have people doing code reviews at the end of the exam. But 1 week open. So basically we tell them, talk to whoever you want to, do whatever research you want to, but get this done in 1 week. And you know, the quality of the people that got into the company quadrupled by doing that. Mm-hmm. It's harder to find people that way though, because we get very few people that get filtered out, but that's what you want. You want the rock stars in your company, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, great people want to work with great people. So anyone who's incorporating some kind of a mechanism to assure that as the landscape of their employee base, I think I mean, for me, that was one of the biggest things that drove my motivation to stay at the same company for so long. I like the people that I work with. I like how much they care about their job, and I like how important it is to everyone that I work with that we get things right. And if that went away, that I don't know exactly what the effect would be that it would have on me, because I haven't had the experience yet, but I can't imagine being satisfied with it. And so we emphasize that as well. Yeah.
You're a clear example that there is still companies around that you have this beautiful career path, that if you really have what it takes and you're willing to do the right moves and stay with integrity and honor, you can actually reach the top. How beautiful is that, right? That's very hard to do nowadays. People just move from jobs to jobs every 2-3 years, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and especially in tech, 3 years is the outside for a lot of folks. Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. Matthew, what do you think it got you there? Once you were in your position, how do you start progressing? Do you have mentors? Did they see something in you where they were mentoring you to get to the top? How did that happen?
Yeah, there were several things. And I would say mentorship is a very, very big one. So that was within and outside the company. So I had good relationships with some folks that I had worked with before I joined CAI, but at some of the other companies that I'd done consulting work with. So they were folks that I stayed in touch with. I could reach out to. I could talk about things that I was thinking or experiencing. They gave me a lot of really good guidance within the organization. I had mentors who I was very fortunate were invested in my success as well. And I had really, really healthy mentoring relationships where it was very bi-directional, right? I'm bringing problems to them that I'm struggling to figure out or whatever the case might be. And they're giving me a lot of really good guidance, but they would run things by me too. And we had a really excellent back and forth with several of the mentors that I had. And I had gone through a few at CAI. I got transitioned over to one individual who, I don't remember what his title was at the time, but he was an executive vice president in the organization. I don't remember exactly what his scope of responsibility was at the time, but he sat me down when I was connected to him and just said, you've been doing the right things for CAI for years. I know you, I know who you are and what you've done. Like, what do you want? Where do you want to go? What do you want your career to be? Right? Let's really have a serious conversation about the future. And I think it was a great discussion because I can't say for sure speaking for him, but I think he was expecting something along the lines of, here are the jobs that I want, and here's the career path that I'm hoping for. My answer was much more in, here's the impact that I want to have on the company, the things that I want to be able to accomplish, and then as a product of that conversation, we translated that into roles and responsibilities. At the time, I don't know if I really would have said I want to be the CTO. Maybe, but I don't know that I would have. I knew what I wanted to do within the org. He had rich history with the company, knew the landscape, and knew to say like, well, what you're describing was really taking you to really a chief technology officer role, right? There's an innovation component to it. There's a delivery component to it. You've got all the right mix here. So that's, that like he helped me set direction that I didn't really have at the time. And it was really significant. But I'd also say the other thing that I try to give a lot of credit to is my peers in the organization. And I listen to them, and I think I'd encourage anyone, listen to how your peers talk about you, and the things that people see and articulate that they believe you do well, lean in on that, right? So and if your peers don't talk about you at all, or don't have anything to say that you do particularly well, then that there could probably be a few good reasons for that, but I'd argue one of them is probably that you don't make yourself approachable enough, and that could be in the way of your promotion. So some self-reflection might be good there. But what I was being told from the folks that were kind enough to give me feedback, and I would solicit it a lot, the consistent theme was, I'll paraphrase them, you're very good at explaining complicated things to people who don't understand. And so I really, having heard that several times, because it wasn't something that I thought I was really conscientiously focused on doing or really actively putting a lot of energy into. It was just important to me that everyone knows what we're doing and where we're going, and that we all have agreement and informed consent to the direction that we're going. And so I just, more philosophically than anything else, I wanted people to know what we were talking about. But being told over and over that that's the thing that you do very, very well, I really made that the focal point of how I did work, and what kind of projects or responsibilities would I sign up for. I went for the complicated stuff that was hard to understand, because the biggest impact on the company I could have is if I can get my brain around it, and then I can get everyone else's brain around it. That's value to CAI. So I didn't see that in myself, but my peers, my reports, my bosses saw it in me, told me, so I really leaned into it, even though it wasn't necessarily natural or comfortable for me.
Beautiful. And that's stretching out of your comfort zone is what gets you to the next level anyways.
Yeah.
Where if something is uncomfortable, then you need to conquer that. Until it becomes comfortable, then you have to get uncomfortable again. That's how I grew my company. That's actually how I got to manage 7 different businesses, because once I was comfortable with one, I will find myself a way to stretch again, even if I failed, so that I could actually move forward and keep progressing in life.
Yep.
So important.
I agree. Yeah. And so is the failure, I think. I mean, having the opportunity to fail, I think, is a really big deal too. It's one of the most valuable learning experiences. Rarely, if ever, does it feel good, but it matters a lot. And I take your point about how you grow. Those are the key components to personal and professional growth.
It reminds me of Edison and the light bulb, right? I think it was over 1,000 times that he failed, but he never saw it as failure. He saw, I found a new way not to find the light.
Yep. Right.
Until he got it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about persistency.
Yep. Yeah. I have a lot of options. Process of elimination is one way to get to the end.
Yeah. Matthew, thank you so much for your time. Over 40 minutes have gone by already, and I want to respect that. I know you're a very busy executive. I'll ask you one last question and we'll finish the podcast. If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it?
Oh boy. I would probably say, if it's a billboard on the busiest highway, brevity is important. So I'd probably say, be you.
Be you. Beautiful. Be you. I got lost in trying to please people.
I think many people do.
I had a heart attack in 2011. I had a heart attack because I was pretending to be somebody else that I thought people will like, and trying to please everybody. And it's funny because instead of accomplishing what I wanted, people saw me as a fake person. And it was just a period in my life, 2-3 years that happened, but it's because I had a lot of insecurities. Once the Lord got me out of that situation and healed my heart, literally healed my heart, and I went back to my faith, and I started realizing that my identity is in Him, and that I am who I am because of the way I was made, and I am uniquely created to create this finished puzzle. I'm just a piece of the puzzle. Once I was completely honest to myself and to the people around me, people started to like me. Isn't it crazy?
Yeah. Right, and I'm not surprised. I mean, I think there's just even if you're someone who's good at being a chameleon and being the person that is most thought to be most desired in a given situation, the emotional toll that takes on people, the amount of satisfaction and energy that you can bring over a long period of time to the work that you're doing, it's all limited by the fact that you're kind of faking your way through it. I don't think that ultimately, I've not been exposed to a situation where that's been helpful to anyone in the long term. And so I think just giving people the freedom to be who they are, and to work within those boundaries to find good careers and happiness, that is a tenet at the core of our Neurodiverse Solutions program, right? Like we're not proposing that autism is something we're striving to cure. It's not even necessarily something that needs to be cured. I mean, as the father of a girl with autism, it's a big part of her personality and the way that she works and the way that she thinks and what makes her special. It's hard in a lot of social situations for that to be acceptable, but she's a great example of someone who just needs to be allowed to be her. And when she can just be herself, what she's capable of is absolutely incredible. I mean, she's so gifted. She's so incredibly fast and bright. I've been telling her teachers for years now, she's either going to be a superhero or a supervillain. There is no in between with her. So it's really just a matter of how we support her.
So let's pray for a superhero. I know she's going to be a superhero because she has a great dad.
I hope so. We'll see.
Matthew, thank you so much. If people would like to find more about CAI and hire your services or ask you questions directly, where can they find you online?
At cai.io.
cai.io. That's beautiful, and it's very simple.
Right. Brevity is always the winner.
Thank you so much, Matthew.
All right. Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you for tuning in to the Leaders in Tech podcast. Check in next week to keep learning how to use technology and leadership to change the game. See you next time.